Hello, everybody. Wow. Well, Hollywood has certainly been in the limelight the last week or so, and I've thought I'd take the opportunity to talk about it. Not just the fires going on in LA, but also Mel Gibson, who appeared on the Joe Rogan show last week. Now, it's a 3 hour long podcast, if you haven't seen it already. And I managed to watch about an hour and a half of it until I got a little bit bored. And I'm going to talk about why I got a little bit bored. Well, actually, no, bored's the wrong word. I'd probably say more fed up and frustrated. Although Mel made some excellent points, and I agreed with him on a lot of stuff he said, I think there were a fair few inconsistencies. And Rogan certainly did a good job, putting him on blast. He didn't. He certainly didn't back down on the tough questions. But yeah, so this is quite a big one to unpack. I'm not really sure which one to start with. I guess we could start with the fact that he was talking about his faith, as you'd expect with Mel. That was always going to be the case, and he very quickly spoke about the Shroud of Turin, which is quite fascinating, really. Obviously, it's a relic of the supposed shroud that Christ was wearing on the time he was crucified and put into a tomb. The interesting thing about it is new evidence has come to light lately that it could well be an authentic fragment, certainly of somebody who was crucified around that time. But what's bizarre is they looked at the sort of diametrics and all that kind of thing, and it does show the exact stab wound of where he would have been pierced. It's got breakages all around his body. It's got cuts on the top of his head to indicate thorns. So when you look at all that, and also it being a 6 foot male, you think, well, how can every single thing be like Christ? How can everything be consistent with his, when he was chastised and surged, not spurged, scourged. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, obviously it is a precarious one. And Mel quite rightly said, it doesn't change his faith, but he does think it's real, and that's cool. He's entitled to have that opinion. Obviously, there are a lot of dubious relics in the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, they will say that they've got the bones of Peter on display in a cabinet and people like that, and it's like, really? Okay, to say he's buried there is one thing, but to say you've actually got his bones is quite another. So it's and we know that the shroud that they have in sorry, not the shroud, the crown of thorns that they have in the Notre Dame, they've actually been proven to be false. So when one thing turns out to be fake, you do question the others. So, and that's fair enough. But what really rattled me with that one is not long after Mel Gibson was questioned on evolution by Joe Rogan. He was asked what he thinks about it all. And he quite admitted, that there is animals that adapt and evolve and change somewhat. But he made it quite poignant that he doesn't believe that we come from monkeys. And quite rightly so. And good on Mel for standing his ground on that. But then Joe Rogan proceeded to say, oh, what about Neanderthals? And he was mentioning these other various like hybrid species between sort of like primate monkeys and humans, like sort of in between, if you like. And Mel was like, well, hang on, wasn't there like a thing that was exposed 5 years ago of a monkey skull merged in with a human skull, and it was turned out to be a fake? And Joe's like, yeah. And then Mel's like, well, how are we to believe the others if that's the case, if they've already fabricated stuff? And he's like, look, I don't really believe everything I see. And that's a fair point, because we've seen with science that it does get manipulated. There are lies. And I think Mel has made a good point. I think he mentioned the dinosaurs as well. I mean, evolutionists say that birds actually have evolved from dinosaurs anyway. So this whole comet hitting the Earth, we don't even know if that's completely true. But Mel made good points, but I did feel that Rogan could have got his nuts on the vice if he'd said to him, "You just said earlier the Shroud of Turin is authentic because the science carbon dates it to the 1st century, but then you don't agree with the Neanderthal skulls and skeletons that we found, and with the carbon dating." So it's kind of like inconsistency there, and I wish Joe had put him on that and see what his reaction would be. But I just think the simplest answer would have been, "Look, mate, I don't need science to prove my faith. You know, that's the whole point of faith. Faith is what you cannot see." What did Jesus say? "Blessed is the man that believed and could not see." You had the story of doubting Thomas when he saw the glorified and resurrected Christ, and he put his hands on the hands of Christ to see the piercing through the hand, the stigmata, and he had to do that to believe it was Christ, because he didn't believe it was him at first. You know, you had the ladies in the tomb mistaking him for the gardener when they first saw him. Faith is a strong thing, and I think that maybe Mel should have probably put his foot down on that one. But anyway, that's that bit for. But that's not the bit that annoys me. That's quite trivial. The bit that really rattled me. I went to a Roman Catholic school growing up, and I grew up with a lot of Catholics, so I know the faith pretty well. I certainly like to think I know the faith quite well. And obviously, being an Anglican, they're kind of like our big brothers anyway, in the sense that, you know, we have kept a lot of their practices. We don't believe in chucking the baby out with the bathwater per se. So I've always had an eye on the Catholic Church to see what they're up to, and what really annoyed me with Mel is he basically said, "Oh, I agree with Bishop Vigano, who's an Italian ex-cardinal." Basically, Bishop Vigano was blasted recently for saying that the Catholic Church is a counterfeit. And basically, the Pope is a nun-pope. He's basically a complete imposter, because he wasn't elected through the usual judicial way. And he took the role of Benedict before Benedict even died, because normally you would take over a pope when they die. Obviously, Benedict was involved with a scandal, sex grooming and all that kind of thing. So he obviously the heat got too much, and he stepped away. And he basically questions the appointment of Francis, whether he's a legitimate pope or not. And for me, I think that's a bit of a cop-out. I think, you know, when you look at the history of the Catholic Church, there's often been bad popes. It's no different to what we've had in the past. I mean, you only have to go back to the day dot. You know, in the 4th, 5th, 6th century, you had popes telling people to go on crusades so they could get into heaven, saying that all their sins will be forgiven if they fight in the holy wars. So, you know, you had ones that had illegitimate sons. You had all types of different popes, and for me, it's a little bit of a cop-out. So basically, what Mel said is he agrees with Vigano, and then he went on to say I'm a pre-Vatican II guy. And then he said the reason why he's a pre-Vatican II guy is because John the 18th, Pope John the 18th, wasn't apparently properly elected. There's a conspiracy around the fact that the smoke that came out of the Vatican came out white, and then they had to recount the ballots, and then it came out black. So he has a suspicion and a conspiracy that he wasn't elected, and there was it was political, and there was some coercion going on. And the bit that really made me laugh is the bit where Mel said, he named himself after an anti-pope. No other pope had his name before. And I'm thinking, okay, what's his name? And then Mel says, his name's John the 18th. I'm like, you do know that there would have been 17 popes before him called John. That is why he's John the 18th. Honestly, I was shocked that he actually said that. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's what he probably should have said is the last pope to take that name was a really bad pope. Because I'm assuming he's referring to John the 17th. But he didn't. And the person that I was watching it with, sitting next to me, he was like, what? If you're not a Catholic, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I just wish Mel would have been a little bit clearer on that. But anyway, so what's so bad about Vatican II? Okay, let's just quickly unfold it for people that aren't Catholic, but that semi-interested, they want to know exactly what's so bad about this Vatican II. So they vernacularized the Mass. Rather than it being Latin in every single country, they made it into whatever the country is, like whether it's English, Spanish, French. That was one terrible thing that they did. Even though nobody learns Latin anymore, especially in England, you would have had people go into Mass not understanding a single thing. I mean, a lot of Catholics these days lack understanding of the Bible anyway, because of how little it's preached out on Mass. So they would have known, and the fact that they rely more on catechisms, which is the teaching of the church, rather than picking up the Bible up themselves and reading it and finding out. So, I just think, is that really the worst thing that happened in Vatican II? Okay, there were obviously a few other things. So I watch a guy called Dr Taylor Marshalll. He's got quite a big YouTube channel. And the other thing that they had a big issue was the Eucharist. Catholics like to, God, it sounds a bit erotic, but they like to get on their knees and put their tongue out. And no, the priest doesn't unzip his trousers. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I'm sounding like Alex Belfield. No, so what happens is the priest gives the communion bread onto the tongue, and then they eat it, and they've always done that, the Roman Catholic Church, and that's to give you that feeling that it is the body of Christ, because it's going straight into your, it's to do with your senses, I think. There must be a reason why they've always done it that way. But for a lot of people, it's tit for tat. To have an issue, I mean, well, you say that, but the Great Schism between the West and the East split over unleavened bread. So I guess it's not the first time bread split people apart. But I would say that was one, and another big one was, this is quite a big one. So the Catholic Church became ecumenical, because there was a time where if you're a Roman Catholic, you didn't believe that there was any church outside of you. So in other words, there was no salvation outside the Roman Catholic Church. They felt that they were the church that was instituted by Christ. So they had the keys of Peter, apostolic succession, and basically every other church is an apostate, including the Eastern Orthodox Church, because obviously they schismed off, right? They didn't want a papacy. So for some Catholics, that was a real big deal. They're like, we don't want them joining us, the Eastern Church. And basically in Vatican II, they said, no, we will happily accept Eastern Orthodox believers to have communion in our church, which is a big thing, because as an Anglican, there are certain Roman Catholic churches I am not allowed to have communion in with. So yeah, that was at the time a big thing. And I think the Catholic Church also joined the World Council, which is another big ecumenical organisation. And there are actually a lot of Protestant churches, including the Anglican Church, that are involved in that. So I think they are the three big ones that I've just mentioned. But I think there's quite a few others, alterations, but nothing drastic, no huge, big changes really. I mean, not that's noteworthy. I mean, one of them was, the Mass. They stopped using the old, they call it the Missal, the Roman Missal, which is a liturgical book. They stopped using that, and they used a more Protestantized version, I wouldn't call it like the Book of Common Prayer, but it's kind of, they called it a Novus Ordo, but I guess it's similar to the Book of Common Prayer in the sense that it's got a few adaptations, modifications, all that, but nothing too drastic, just a slight tweak in the liturgy. I mean, the Lord's Prayer still prayed out and all that kind of thing, but yeah, so that was another big one. So okay, so 4, but it gets better than this, right? You want to hear Mel's inconsistencies? Well, this is one big inconsistency. So Mel Gibson had an affair. I mean, it's no shock to anybody. Obviously, he had a long saga of drinking problems. There was a time where he had an affair on his wife, and they ended up breaking up, and as a result, divorcing. And I think Mel went on to actually remarry a Russian lady who was a lot younger than him. But my point is, he had a divorce in the Roman Catholic Church, and that is like cardinal sin. Basically, pre-Vatican II, if you were to have a divorce, you would not be able to take communion. That's how big a thing it is. And communion's quite a big thing in the Catholic Church. Some churches do it every day. Some Catholics do it every day. You're receiving the real body and blood of Christ. They believe it on the altar. It's consecrated through transubstantiation. And so that's a big deal if you're a Catholic. Even if you don't believe in a works-based salvation, you still believe that communion's efficacious and important for the soul. So Mel was refused by his local parish for a very long time. It was a big, big thing. And then not long after, I think the Pope softened it. I'm not sure if it's the current one or the one before him. And they basically said, well, actually, we can give out annulments, which basically means that your marriage wasn't really a proper marriage in the first place. And then we'll get round it, and then we could re-administer the communion. So Mel's lucky. So Mel now can have communion. Pre-Vatican II, he would not have been able to have communion. So Mel, was pre-Vatican II a really bad thing? Because you can't have your cake and eat it, brother. It's either a good thing or it isn't. And this is the inconsistencies. This is the inconsistency of Mel's chat with Joe Rogan. And I thought I would just bring that up because, Vatican II has saved his bacon in regards to that. So what I would like to ask Mel is, yeah, you agree with Bishop Vigano, but do you think the Catholic Church is now a counterfeit? If so, why do you still consider yourself as a Roman Catholic? Doesn't make much sense. He also talked about this bizarre supernatural thing he had with this Chinese doctor, and it sounded like astro projection, where the Chinese doctor got him climbing up the wall. And he went up to his Catholic priest and said, oh, it's not demonic, is it? And then the Catholic priest said to him, well, did it make you feel good? And he's like, yeah, it made me feel good, and it healed me. And then the Catholic priest said, oh, it's okay then, yeah, it's not demonic. I mean, you couldn't make this up. You couldn't make this up. I found that to be quite comical. And then they were talking about the fires, and I mean, there's some real negligence on the wildfires. They brought up like Trump, the conversation Trump had with Rogan even 4 months ago, saying that it was just a disaster waiting to happen. And there's people in senior positions that should not be there. They've got blood on their hands. The fact they didn't have enough hydrants, it really is bad. It's looking worse every day. In fact, that incident with the wildfires, and I pray that there is a bit of salvaging, because we certainly don't want it to get worse than it is, I just hope God can restore and revive the city, and that it's not completely torched alive, because otherwise you've got like 1 million people who are exiled. Where are they going to live? It's so I'm praying for things to improve there. But yeah, I guess they were the two big things. But I would say the biggest thing, which I'm leaving till now, was when Mel was talking about his new movie, which is basically called The Ressurection of the Christ. And this movie has been talked about for as long as I remember. I'd say for at least 20 years. You know, Mel has been asked about this so many times, and it seems to be always the same reply. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And still no fruit. I mean, what's going on with this film? I think Mel went on to say that, you know, it's not my time. I don't want to rush it, which is fair enough. We want this movie to be good. You know, he said it's God's perfect time, blah, 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 blah. And then Joe Rogan said, so when are you going to start filming it? And then Mel said, hopefully this year. And I'm thinking, what? You've not even started filming it yet? I mean, he was doing something in Malta last year, and I assumed that was for the film. So he basically said that all he's done so far is the writing. Him and his brother are working on it together, and a few other people, and they've got great ideas, and it's not even hit the pre-recording yet. It's like, what? I'm mystified. I really am. I mean, talk about someone who wants to stay relevant. You know, why put so many false hope into Christians all around the world to say, you know, this film's in motion and it's, you know, we're going to have it soon, blah, blah, blah. And then to say you've not even started filming it, it's really disappointing. I was expecting a bit more on that. So yeah, I wasn't happy when I heard that, to say the least. And that's not the worst thing. So Joe said, who's going to play Jesus? And Mel replied, the same guy, Jim. Jim Caviezel. Okay, so Jim Caviezel must be pushing on 50 now. I mean, Passion of Christ was done over 20 years ago. And as great an actor he is, and he is a fantastic actor, I mean, he did play Christ brilliantly well. You know, there's question marks over like the age of the guy. You know, if this is based on 3 days after the crucifixion and it's 25 years later, it's like, how are you going to fill that gap, bro? And then Mel's like, well, you know, you can do such great special effects these days, CGI, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, so if they can pull that off and make Jim look much, much, much younger, then fair play. But yeah, I was a bit shocked when he said that. I mean, I was thinking maybe get someone that looks like him, or maybe Jonathan Rhys. Oh no, don't forget I said that. But yeah, I mean, it was a great interview. They talked about loads of different things, and I do like the fact that Mel was very open and honest with all his answers. He didn't do that typical politician trying to duck out of things, and he was, yeah, his answers were very honest and elaborate and quite heartfelt, I thought. But yeah, I mean, talking of Hollywood though, obviously Joe Rogan, I think his studio is not far from that area. I think it's around California, and I just couldn't help think, you know, about these wildfires and what went on 2 days before the wildfires down at the Golden Globes. Nicki Glaser, is it? I mean, I don't think I've got words for this woman. I mean, I looked to find out who she actually is, because I'd never heard of her before. I mean, she was not funny. I mean, talk about cringe. I mean, really? And I looked and I'm like, okay, so she's done a few reality TV shows. I think she's presented Blind Date, some sort of romance show. I don't know what it's called. Cheats and Liars or something like that. Nothing really noteworthy. And she's been in some pretty crap films. And she's actually known to be a comedian. This is the shocking part. Yeah, I heard her voice. She had a lovely voice. I was inclined to think maybe a singer or an actress, but comedian, that's the best you can get. You know, when they've had Ricky Gervais for years and years and years, and they have this woman who, I don't know, she's as dippy and as blonde as you like, to be honest. There was nothing profoundly witty or intelligent in anything she said that night. I mean, I only watched bits of it, but to be honest, that was enough. She had a voice that just grates, and you know, was she 40? She actually looks older. She obviously doesn't have a very good plastic surgeon. But no, anyway, less about her. It's her comments, the comments she made. I mean, I can't believe it. So she mocks God twice. Okay, the Pope, a lot of people poke fun out of him. I get that. She put his big hat on, and she was saying, I don't know, it was some backhanded comment, and then that was the first thing she did, and then not long after she did this survey. It was like an imaginary survey, like how many people think this, how many people think that, and then right at the bottom of the list, which scored a mighty 0, was God. She said God, and there was a massive jeer of laughter in the background. So people obviously found it funny. These sick, twisted Hollywood people found it funny, because obviously it's cool to hate Jesus in Hollywood. That's how you get big film roles. I don't know if you know that. I mean, even Mel alluded to earlier, he said basically Jim Caviezel, after he did Passion of Christ, he couldn't get any film. He couldn't get in anything. Even though he was a great actor and he won awards for it, he could not get in anything. So that's how Hollywood basically is. And I think the Golden Globe ceremony just showed that, you know, in plain sight. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting. I mean, I don't get me wrong, it's not the first time I've seen God get mocked, but it was just, I think what upset me the most was the laughter she got from it. If it was a few ha-has, then okay, fair enough. You know, that's just one person who's making a mockery of God. But the loud jeer in the background, and all I'm going to say is I'm not shocked with the wildfires the day after. I mean, personally, I think it was always going to happen. It was a disaster waiting to happen. But as Mel said earlier, God's timing's perfect. And day after, why not? And yes, there's innocent, good Bible-believing Christians that probably have been affected by this, and it's sad that they have to suffer. But what does that remind you of? Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, Lot had to get out of there. He was the only one good apple out the whole lot of the town, and he had to flee. This is how it is, guys. This is end times. We're a remnant. Us Christians that actually follow the Bible. What are we, the 0.1%, 0.2% is staggering. But God is patient. We've seen in the past, you know, even his own people have been punished. You know, 400 years. What was it? They spent 50 years in the Babylonian exile. But I think in Egypt they were a long, long time until sort of Moses sort of brought them out the promised land. But yeah, God is patient. So yes, the fact that we're in the 21st century and you've got 99% of the world just scoffing at God, don't be shocked. And yes, there will be good believers that will have to go into martyrdom as a result of this. There are good believers that will have to suffer along. You know, all we can do is when we do hear people mock the Lord or say his name in vain, just don't be shy. Just fucking, sorry about my language, but just admonish them. You're meant to do that. Admonishment isn't just for fellow Christians. If you want to evangelize and bring people to God, you have to stand by your conviction, because what does make people take us seriously is when they see the strength of our faith. Because when they see people prepared to die and lose their job over their faith, they might start to question, actually, maybe there's something in this. And that's how I look at it. So that Golden Globe ceremony, I don't care if I'd have lost my career. I'd have gone straight up there. And I would have I don't know what I would have done. I would have made that woman look silly. I would have grabbed the mic and humiliated her. That's what I would have done. I mean, God says vengeance is his. I certainly wouldn't have done anything spiteful or aggressive or violent, but I would have at least put her straight and admonished her, because we are allowed to do that as Christians. But yeah, so all going on in Hollywood, guys. Put in your comments if you agree with me or anything that I've missed or anything that I've got wrong. Obviously, put a like if you think the material's good, and least not forget, if you haven't already, please subscribe. We want to get the channel up to 1,000 by the end of the month. It's growing quick already, but I think the more people we get, the more multiplication will happen. And let's be the fishermen among men. Let's build a community here, a community of people that can see the wolves, and call the bad stuff out. Anyway, God bless, guys. Take care.